In this chapter, we'll take a look at some of the basic shading principles you need to know in order to create realistic and accurate materials in Cycles. But the number one thing we need to do before we start shading is lighting. So that's what we'll do in this video. Now usually it's a good idea to set up the lights that will be similar to the lights we use in the final animation so that we can make sure everything will look good. But in most cases, a character needs to look good under any lighting situation, whether it's a nighttime shot in the city or out in the desert during the day. And this is where being physically based helps us a lot. If we can make sure that the lighting we use while we're shading is physically based and then everything looks good, then we can be pretty sure that the lighting we use in our final animation is going to look good as well. If we don't pay attention to this, then our animation will look fake, or we'll end up wasting time and going back to change the character shaders when it's already supposed to be finished. So let's take a look at our scene. We've got the cool looking ninja over here, a camera and a ground plane, and that's it. So in order to start lighting, I'm not going to go and add a bunch of lamps. Instead, I'm going to use an HDR image, and the reason for this is because an HDR image is a sort of a record of the lighting in a real actual scene in real life. So let's go ahead and switch the renderer to Cycles, and then in the world settings we can go and disable the ambient occlusion because we don't need that, and hit use nodes for the surface. Now basically, if I go and press Shift Z in the viewport, we can see that we have a white background and it's emitting light in our scene. If we turn the strength to 0, we don't have any light, so that's how we know that this is the only light in the whole scene. Now of course we can increase the strength if we want, or change the color or something like that, and that's pretty cool. But instead we're going to go and add a texture to this color over here, and that is going to be an environment texture. Now an environment texture is pretty much the same as an image texture. You can even use a JPEG or a PNG or something like that. But the only difference is that it maps it correctly to the environment. So let's use that. And now you can see we've got this awesome pink background that gives us the perfect realistic lighting you see in films all the time. But instead, let's go and hit the open button, and in the textures folder you'll find a St. Lucia 2K.hdr. Now this is an HDR image I took while I was on holiday once, so I know it's got a pretty good dynamic range, and to give an example of that, take a look at the window over here. There we go. If I decrease the strength of the light, you can suddenly start to see outside the window. Now you can't actually do that with normal JPEGs and things. And it's sort of the same with the dark areas down in the corner, for example. If we increase the strength, we can sort of start to see detail in the dark areas. And that's basically what an HDR image is. It's a regular image that has a whole lot more information for the light areas and the dark areas. Okay, but that's kind of our lighting done. The strength, maybe we put it on 2, and that's cool. But as you can see, this image is really noisy, and even if we go and enable the border in the render settings so that it should only render what we can see in the camera, it's still very slow and noisy. Of course, we can increase the samples, and then eventually it's going to clean up and look good, but it's going to take forever. So instead, we're going to do a bit of optimization. And to do that, we just need to go to the settings of our environment, and we've got this thing here called multiple importance sampling. And what that does for the environment is it takes a look at our texture, the image, and it tries to figure out where to emit the most light, based on, how bright something is. So if we just enable that, you'll see very quickly that it's much cleaner. But we can do a little bit better because we've got this map resolution over here. And what this basically is the resolution of the map it generates when trying to figure out where the bright parts are. So if we put this on something like 1024, it's going to render even quicker, or less noisy anyway. And basically you want to keep this at the same resolution as the lowest resolution of your texture. In this case, it's a 2K by 1K image, so we're going to make this 1K. And that is basically the lighting. The last thing I want to do for lighting is rotate the image and just move this window over here onto this side. So to do that, we just need to open up the node editor. That's over there. switch to the world nodes, and then it's exactly the same as you saw in the previous video. You just add a texture coordinate and a mapping coordinate, or a mapping node, and plug in the generated to the environment. Now basically, I know I said that image textures use UVs, but technically this is an environment texture, so the default it uses is generated. If you try to use UVs, it's gonna just be black, which is a bit strange. Okay, so then to rotate it, we just need to change the Z value, and if you watch the shadow is busy moving, or of course you can see it in the viewport over here, which is cool. So I'm going to put this around about 89 degrees, and there we go. We've got a nice strong but sort of soft key light coming from the left, and then a nice orange fill light on the right, which is coming from this lamp over here. And that's it for the lighting. There's two more little things I want to do for the rendering speed, and it's not really going to make too much difference. The first one is the tile size. Now the tile size doesn't make too much difference for CPU, just keep it around 32 or somewhere there. But for GPUs it makes a really big difference. I am running with CPU at the moment because the Ninja doesn't actually fit on the memory of my GPUs. But just keep in mind, if you are rendering on your GPU, then keep these around 256 or 512 depending on the scene. It changes. You'll want to play around with this a bit and see what gives you the quickest render time. Or as you can see here, I've got this thing called Auto Tile Size, which is an add-on I wrote a while ago, which basically just does all that stuff for you. You don't have to think about it, and you can download that from the official Blender add-on repository, and it'll just figure out what's the best tile size for you based on whether it's CPU or GPU and based on the resolution of your render. Anyway, then the last thing I want to do is the light paths. Now the light paths have a thing called bounces, and this is basically how many times the light bounces off a surface. So if I put the bounces on 0, then basically it's only direct light. All the lighting is happening is coming from the environment image and hitting the surface of the Ninja. But if I increase this to 1 bounce, then the light will hit the Ninja and bounce off the Ninja and hit something else, or maybe hit the ground and bounce off the ground onto the Ninja. You can't really see the difference here, but anyway. And then of course if we do 2 bounces, it's going to bounce off the ground and onto the Ninja and then onto something else as well. Normally the defaults are, I mean, they're good, but when we're just testing shaders and things, it's probably a good idea just to keep these quite low, like on 1 or 2, just to speed up the render a little bit. And that's basically it. Just a little explanation about these. The min and max bounces here is sort of the final say in the matter. There's sort of a maximum clamp for the rest of these. We could maybe put these on 12, then we'll only get 4 diffuse bounces, but we will get 12 transmission bounces. But if we put this on, say, 6, then we'll still get 4 diffuse, but now we'll only get 6. So this is sort of like a maximum clamp for everything. So let's just keep that on 1, and that's it for the lighting in this video. In the next video, we're actually going to start the fun stuff by doing some shading.